You don't get a J.K. Rowling without a Janice Raymond. Claims that trans a golden age of trans inclusion. Yes, there's been visibility, but so many of our folks, especially the most marginalized, have still had it really hard. And our community has never had the material support that it needed and deserved to survive, let alone to thrive. And so I can't just talk about the right and the conservatives. I have to talk about so-called progressive spaces too. Because while we were having conversations back in 2020 about having to end police brutality and being anti-racist, we're seeing right now that a lot of that was just lip service, right? And even in that time and since that time, Black trans women and trans Latinas were still being murdered. Trans youth and trans masculine folks were still facing staggering rates of suicidality. And discrimination never let up in housing and healthcare or in education and the workplace. Yes, we have some headline grabbing firsts. I'll be the first to let you know that. But how many of us were supposed to be satisfied just with symbolism? How many times were we told that if we were just included and as long as we played nice and stayed quiet, didn't take up too much space, that we wouldn't become too much of a target anymore? And let's be real. So I've already said the fire is high right now, but it seems like it's getting even higher. So we just hit Pride Month and most of our so-called corporate allies, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of them, have ghosted us. Many Democratic leaders have been missing since the election, or worse, weaponizing our experiences. And those who once swore that they had our backs have disappeared. And so it shows us that sometimes the solidarity that a lot of these systems and institutions say that they have turns out to just be selective, turns out to just be something that we can lean on when it's easy. And we have to talk about the things that we have to do inside our house as a movement. We've let corporate floats and galas overshadow mutual aid and street organizing for too long. We've let people act as if activists and community organizers are the bane of their existence, even though everything that they have comes from the fire of activists and community organizers. Let's be real. Whether they were accidental or intentional. I'm always talking about the Stonewall riots because on that night, it was a bunch of people who were very unlikely who had to become activists and organizers that night, those nights. And not only do we have to talk about the corporatization and how we've leaned on these corporations that have quickly turned their backs on us, but I can't tell you how many times in just the last few months I've been in spaces where white cis gay people are stressing over their second homes and whether they'll lose them, while many of us don't even have the option to even think about having one home. right? Or paying our rent. And trans youth are worrying if they'll even make it to adulthood. That's a problem. Our priorities, a lot of our priorities are out of whack, as our larger community continues to remind us. And I also have to say that we've often celebrated policy wins that have mostly benefited the privileged, while our most vulnerable continue to die by violence and poverty and abandonment. And we have to continue to ring the alarm for our folks who have the least, because that really shows us where our values lie as a collective. I have to name that national nonprofits often hoard the lion's share of funding, while grassroots organizations and organizers are just trying to scrape by. And those are conversations that are, I know, really hard for folks to have, but we have to continue to have them. And many of the most resource organizations in our movement can't even name state violence as a problem. Will threaten to pull funding if you say anything about the genocide of Palestinians. Can't say abolition, can't really talk about what trans antagonism really looks like and operates like, even behind their own doors. And they won't say it's a disgrace to partner with weapons manufacturers while quoting Marsha P. Johnson. Now, ain't that a damn shame? So we must ask, what kind of movement are we going to build for when the pendulum swings back in the right direction? What kind of movement are we going to maintain? So I contend that this is not a time where we just simply protect what was before Trump got back into office. This is a time to rethink everything, y'all. We get a chance to rebuild, to repair, to renew our commitment. And, you know, this may be bold, maybe a few things I said already are bold, but I'll be honest, I really feel like trans people, particularly Black and brown trans folks, are owed a bit of reparations from our movement. We can't live and thrive and sustain ourselves on pity and performance and sound bites from cis lips. We need some reparations. We have been the spiritual and strategic backbone of this movement for decades. And yet we still remain underpaid, underprotected, and overwritten, while our labor is mined for culture, language, and clout. So I want to know, where's the return for all that we do, all the fruits that we have borne for this world and this movement? And I think reparations means more than funding. It means truly investing in leadership. It means if you don't think that that trans leader exists today, what are you doing to build a pipeline so that they can exist tomorrow? It means understanding that we need safety, we need rest, as we heard on the last panel, and we need our legacy fully honored, acknowledged, and protected. It means resourcing trans-led organizations at the scale that cis-led ones have had for years. It means creating futures for trans and non-binary youth that isn't just soaked in trauma, because they're leading too. They're not waiting for us. And visibility without infrastructure and protection is simply just exploitation. It's allyship without redistribution. So I don't want us to beg for inclusion anymore. I don't want us to try and convince people of our humanity. I'm here to remind you that you are the lifeblood of this movement. And we are never going to be an afterthought because we are the pulse of this movement. So in thinking about trans leadership in this moment, I don't think of it necessarily as an aspiration because I know it exists already. It's sitting in this room. It's the ones who have held the line for decades and generations, again, often unpaid and unseen, moving with nothing but conviction and community and connection, as we heard many times today. It's organizers without foundations that back them. It's the caregivers who raise the kids that the world casts aside. It's the healers who show up still nursing their own wounds. And trans people, especially Black trans women and femmes, have led from the beginning. I think about Ballroom and Star and Now. I think about Miss Major's Oasis out in Arkansas. So from her to people like Miss Dee Dee Chambly in Atlanta, to DC's own Earlene Budd, to our very own Marissa Miller. Thank you. I think about our trans Latinas who have always been in lockstep. Sylvia Rivera and Lorena Borjas, Santa Cecilia Gentili. And I think about our movement fathers and uncles and brothers who face so much erasure. The Carter Browns, the Kyla Broaduses, the Diego Sanchez's, the Chris Hayashis, and yes, our very own Dr. Elijah Nicholas. And while the world may not always recognize our leadership, at the very least, we know better. We know that leadership isn't always loud. It isn't always linear. It's not always or often legible to systems that are designed to erase us. But our leadership, trans leadership, it is visionary. It is relentless. And it is unfuckwittable. Period. And it lives in every trans person who dares to stay alive when the world tells us that we shouldn't. It's every kid who demands to be called by their name. It's every elder who bears the weight of their scars and still smiles and still gives us wisdom. And so I ask the question to this room of leaders: how will we protect that fire for the people in this room and beyond it? So another element of this conversation on leadership was to talk about the audacity of it. And I think what's most audacious about us is that we wake up every day still believing that liberation is within reach. And I think there are others out there who feel it too, but they constantly have to be reminded, and that's a part of our work as well. The audacity of our leadership is in loving while surviving. It's in dreaming while we're under siege. It's in refusing to become what they said we must simply to deserve dignity. And we lead not because we're perfect, but because we're clear about our history and the vision of the world that we want to see. And the world that I'm already seeing unfold gives me so much hope, y'all. It's a Black trans NYU student like Logan Rosas using his graduation speech to stand up for Palestinians. It's a community organizer and activist like Queen Jean throwing a ball to educate voters on ranked choice voting. You can clap some more. It's protesters reclaiming Stonewall after Trump officials tried to hijack our history. I need that. It's affirming parents refusing to flinch at the magnitude of their trans child's power and potential. And since this is a global fight, we have to remember that it's not just what's happening here in what people call the imperial core. There are folks fighting in every corner of this globe. Our counterparts in Poland and Hungary and Uganda and Lebanon and Argentina, we actually have a lot to learn from them about resisting and strategizing and holding one another down. And the audacity of power comes in the form of us entering rooms that were never meant for us, or better yet, building our own, like this one today. And it's about understanding that regardless of what the Supreme Court says in the Scarmetti case and many others, we got us. We have always had us. And so leadership looks like us. We are the mirror, y'all. We're not exceptional. I don't believe in all of that. But we are evidence that it is possible to understand trans power. So I'm gonna wrap up and return to Marsha one more time. What I learned while delving deeper into her story was that Marsha was a caretaker during the AIDS crisis. After years of sex work, mental illness, housing insecurity, she still found ways to use her little cup that she often joked about, asking if people could spare change for a dying queen, using that cup to pour into others. With what little she had, she gave. She lived abundance, even in scarcity. So let her be a lesson of what's possible. Let her remind us that, yeah, there's a fire happening around us, but we also carry within us a formidable fire as well. And we're not going to be told to be silent. We're not going to retreat. I can't even spell closet. We're not going to wait for safety. Because we just simply can't wait anymore. We've been waiting a long damn time. And we understand that our liberation is bound up in everyone's, that our fight is global, and so our response must be coordinated, courageous, and yes, transnational. So to the organizers, the artists, the caregivers, the thinkers, the warriors in this room and yet to come, take this chance as a moment to recommit to trans power. May you lead with love and don't feel that you have to do it without rage, because rage can be a galvanizing force. And may you rest when needed so that you can rise when it's time. And may you remember what you carry and who you carry it for. We're a movement, we're a mirror, we're a reckoning, we're ancient and the future at the same time. Right. And we ain't going nowhere. Right.
So we have three, one more time. We have 3 afternoon conversations, and the next one will be, let's see, We start with moderator Amari McGee and Raquel, our ward, Angelique Godwin, and Jasmine Saki.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me pretty good?
Yeah.
All right, welcome everyone to the National Transdisability March to Policy and Safety Summit here in DC. My name is Amari McGee. For those who do not know, I am a social data scientist, historian, and researcher, and my mission really is to foster an understanding of human diversity and also as well use my data to be able to have people understand transgender history, our issues, and our ongoing rights currently as we're working on right now. As you can guess, I am deeply honored here to be a part of a vital conversation really about digital privacy, data protection, and also bodily autonomy in the trans community. Like I said, with my work, like I said, I try my best to have people understand exactly who we are, what that means, and like the history that we have here and why our history is important to bridge the gap, like I said, understanding how we can move forward and foster understanding with that. So today I am gathered here by an exceptional group of individuals, of course, and all the work that you do bring and your diverse perspectives. So our panelists will serve with their insights on how we can better protect individuals and privacy and dignity in the digital world. I want to go really quick and do a quick introduction for each of you, if you don't mind, just so that people can know exactly who we're going down the hall here. So I'm gonna start, and if you don't mind raising your hand, because I don't have an order here, so just as a heads up. Oh, I'm here with R. Ward from UCC, my apologies, a professor of theology whose work centers on narrative care and collaborative humanity, serves as a team lead and minister of gender and human sexuality justice, focused on holistic approaches for gender and sexuality justice care and resource offerings. I am next going to introduce Jasmine Sasaki from Black and Pink, bringing intensive experience, my apologies, in sexual health education and training, working as a PrEP navigator and HIV counselor, too, as well in St. Memphis, in the city of my apologies. Angelique Godwin, Director of Transgender Equality for Equality Florida, led major initiatives, including the 2024 Let Us Live March Voices for Change Summit. And then lastly, Raquel Willis, who just spoke momentarily, co-founder of the Gender Liberation Movement, obviously, as we know, award-winning activist, journalist. We could talk about your many achievements dating back to 2017, but your most recent one being Time 100 Woman of the Year. So congratulations.
Oh, wow. I ain't talking no more. I'm done.
You did do a long speech, so we ain't gonna see you first, of course. But I do have a list of questions here, like I said, that will really explore critical questions, like I said, about data privacy, data safety, and I really just want to start with our work first, like I said, because Raquel, you literally just spoke, so you sit right next to me, so I'm not gonna do that to you. But as we talk about, like I said, kind of like security around the trans community and kind of what we can best do. What you will often see lately is like a lot of doxing, harassment online, and things of that nature, data breaches. So I really want to talk about really our perspectives of freedom, because you talk about that a lot in the work that you do are an embodiment of justice. So how can protecting of trans individuals' bodily autonomy in that physical and digital space look like in your work?
Ooh. So many things. I want to say that UCC stands for the United Church of Christ, and we have been longstanding partners with National Trans Visibility March all 7 years. We do that because of that very question you're asking. In order to, I don't believe in safety. I think we can't promise safety. I think there's a misconstruing of, we can assure safety in the world, but I know what we can assure is brave space and awareness. I often talk about when I'm doing toolkit information that we have through our church, when we're talking about gender and sexuality, I talk about the difference between understanding and awareness. I'm a trans non-binary human being. I can understand my experience. Another person who may not identify that way can't understand all the fullness of my experience, but they can be aware. So I think that safety, creating a culture of awareness is a key first step, especially for people who are entering at different phases of their journey, who may not be a part of the queer community, who are wanting to be in help, who are wanting to be in solidarity, who are wanting to be an ally, who are maybe wanting to take an even step further and be a co-conspirator with me and roll up the sleeves a bit. Awareness is really, 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 really key. The other component, especially for us, we're coming from a church framework. I work at the national setting of our denomination. So we're at the national setting, we're helping equip our churches and communities with the resources they need and with hopefully the understanding and awareness about what they're traversing. So something that we've been doing through our team is really leaning into a campaign called Love is Louder, Love Your Neighbor Out Loud. It has a really accessible point of entry through scripture, of course, about loving your neighbor as you love yourself. But we're also helping people through that campaign teach and also preach from the pulpit. Maybe they go to the Capitol, maybe in their one-on-one conversations about communal offering. We have buildings. So for example, we have buildings that can offer safety as a church in this current moment. There's still separation of church and state. And so we have buildings and we have resources in those buildings. So if your high school isn't letting you have your Gay Straight Alliance or your LGBTQ plus club, you can have that in a United Church of Christ church. There's safety that we can offer by making that bridge of communal offering. So a lot of the work I do is to help people vision cast and see, through the murky water, especially if you're someone engaging this moment and maybe just waking up. There's some of us that have been awake for a really long time, and there's some of us just waking up. And I have compassion for those across that spectrum. And the invitation is to say, what do you have? What's your internal audit of where you are so that you can ensure what you may have isn't within you? And then how are you going to show up in your community to create those spaces and places that have been taken away? That's what I believe the church can do, and I know the church can do, and it's actively a part of the work we do right now. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to Angelique and Jasmine real quick, and really just keep it a little bit broader compared to like the work that we both do, of course. Whoever wants to start first. Talking about how the threats to data privacy and data safety and digital safety are uniquely impacting the community right now. So in your lines of work, what have you been doing to kind of implement strategies to be able to assist in a world right now? And like I said, Angelique, for you being in Florida, obviously with anti-trans bills, and things of that nature. How would you both compare, like I said, whoever wants to go first, the work that you do and kind of how we can help implement strategies to assist our community?
So I am in Memphis, Tennessee, and I also do work in Omaha, Nebraska. I think that the work I do is with people who do sex work and people who use drugs. Also, people who are currently incarcerated or newly re-entering society. So when it comes to data privacy, it's more in the health sector for that community because for reasons we know how HIV can be criminalized, especially for people who do sex work, right? So those breaches can really be detrimental not only to how they live their lives, but their freedom as well. And I think that we can only do so much to vet out who we go to for our healthcare, right? And we definitely don't know how we can vet out their systems that they're using. So what I have been encouraging people to do is we've created a toolkit on how to vet the doctor, right? But having conversations with your doctor and asking the questions that you want to ask, because we're in a time when you have to do that. But also, I like what you said about awareness, because we also have to be aware that everybody doesn't have the privilege right now to just say what they want to say, right? People are living in fear, and some people are really trying to remain as stealth as possible about all things. So I think that I have told people to take care of themselves and lean into what they have done before we were under the previous administration, because I always say as a Black trans woman, I've been under plenty shitty administrations. So I've had to move through that and navigate through that, and whatever I've done previously to take care of myself is what I do to take care of myself now. So that's what I encourage the people that we serve to do. But I will say, if you have that courage to ask the questions that you need to ask, definitely do that. I think that when it comes to the work that we do at Black and Pink, we've created a project where we had system impacted trans youth doing the research and creating the research, right? So they're able to control the research and they're able to ask the necessary questions around what it is they want to know without triggering people. And the only way we can know what those questions are is by including communities. So uh, being the creators of your own research is really important because you may have more control on how it's used later.
Yeah, girl. I love you so much. Thank you so much for that. No, my work in Florida is a little differently. I think that as trans individuals we are never monolithic, right? There's no one right way to be trans. And I think that our work reflects that as well. So what I do as the director of transgender equality is I work with different organizations. I look at the level of care across the board in every sector. So whether you're a parent, a kid, in school, healthcare, whether you're organization or a business, my job is to make sure that you have the tools and the resources you need, and then also keep you protected in the ways of helping you understand policy, helping you know what you can and can't do when those laws are being made before they even come out, before they hit the ground running. Because in Florida, we've been Project 2025 since 2022. Like, let me just keep it real. So the work that I do in protecting people is so big, it's spherical. But for example, we just did our second ever Let Us Live March in Florida, which is a march that's trans-led by trans organizations across the state of Florida. We had 22 different organizations, over 400 people show up. And how we protected those people is through their registration process. You know, data is the number one thing that people have access to, and people at home who ain't never been to school can hack your profile and steal your whole life. But, you know, we can't get the bank to give us our money on time. So, because it's all through the system, right? So we use specific technology and specific things like, you know, everybody loves a Google document. It's easy to use, but it's very easy to hack. So paying attention to how you have people do things like that to register and keep their information safe and secure. We do a lot of mobilization through our organization. So we're mobilizing people across the entire state and even some people outside of the state who come in and visit or have family there. So protecting people's information is the number one goal. It's the number one thing we aim for because we don't want anybody to have access to your information. You know, it's bad enough that these people sell our information to, you know, the people who hound us on the phone and call us and text us. You know, Fashion Nova got me on lock. It's crazy. But I gave that information, right? You know, I willingly signed up for the 17 text messages and the 2 phone calls. Right, yeah, I willingly asked for it. So I think that that's a huge thing, but it goes even further than that. Like you were talking about, like healthcare. Like we work with a lot of healthcare organizations to make sure people get access to HRT. In Florida, there was a huge thing where they tried to get different schools and medical facilities to release that information on who was receiving transgender care. And basically trying to override HIPAA, and we were lucky enough to have so many people who were like, heck no, like you can't have this. So having people like that, having organizations like mine and other organizations in the state, it's really important that we stand our ground and that we don't comply, that we don't settle for somebody just being a bully. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a front line of, and it's a different kind of line of protection.
It absolutely made me think about something that's so important. For me, the threat, what we're seeing, you know, these cyber threats can also turn into physical threats, right? And also it exasperates the mental capacity of trans individuals, right? People are so afraid, you know, of what can happen that people might not push themselves to move, you know, in a direction that could change their life. So that's just really important that we encourage people to be out here in the trenches and to do what they need to do to be a possibility model, right? Because some people just don't have it right now to give, but you know, somebody's got to do it.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just gonna say, yeah, that's a really relatable thing. That was like me. I had this discussion outside over lunch. I said, you know, somebody would have came up to me 10 years ago and said, like, you're gonna be an activist and an advocate, and you're gonna literally run around the state protecting trans lives. I said, I would have laughed at you. I was a drag queen flipping in front of dollar. I was like, girl, you're not gonna have me in the sunlight looking like this. This is for the show. This is for the nighttime, you know. But the reality is that sometimes the calling comes to you unexpectedly, and you can only ignore it for so long before it fully envelops itself in you. And I remember in Florida they did a drag ban, and that's what actually got me started. They were like, Girl, they cut off all the governor put in a state of emergency against drag. Now, if you know drag queens, trans women are like the number one for drag queens. I don't know if you got no trans women in your city doing drag, we got a problem. We got to talk about that because they are literally the cornerstone of the industry. And so when they did that in Florida, it put a lot of people out. And we immediately had to turn into action. And that was the thing that got me out of my bed. Was like, I was good. I could go get a job somewhere. I had another job, you know, but my friends, my family, people I love, they couldn't. And they didn't know where to start for protection. So I had to step up and be that person. And now a year and a half later, I'm the director of a company that I used to be a volunteer for. So never look at something and think, oh, that's not for me, or oh, I couldn't do that. Because when you step up into your position and you really accept the fact that you have power and you use your platform, anything is possible.
What's funny is I'm gonna actually piggyback off of the data part of everything because when it comes to queer data, right, it helps us figure out a lot of social inequalities. It helps us expose transphobia. It helps us expose homophobia, patriarchy, misogyny, all of the things, right? And when we think about the Trump administration and what they're currently working on when it comes to a federal stance of, like I said, having all these bills, executive orders, to basically stop, not only erase, but like I said, stop and completely wipe us out. There's a couple of things that makes this difficult, right? When it comes to being able to have queer people come out and actually give us their data in order for us to figure out how we can create solutions to problems within our community first. And like I said, obviously helping others outside who want to be allies and advocates and et cetera. So we have the consensus concerns about that, you know, trying to have questions. There's like a self-reporting bias I've been hearing about too as well. Intersectionality becoming an issue and a concern because we don't want, you know, just, trans white people coming out. No offense, not saying that in a negative way, but you know, like being able to actually see different sides of the sector for each and every one of us. So a question that kind of like a follow-up is, how do we ethically collect, use, and protect trans community data in ways to actually build trust, to have people come in, say, hey, we're not going to use your data to be malicious and et cetera. And also, like I said, we want this to be a safe space so that we can assist in our community to be able to help others. Anyone concerned? Is it not?
I'm sorry, I have a burning answer for that because we did do that. And I think the first thing you have to do is have a committee of folks to create what the whole process looks like. Otherwise, the people don't control the data and people don't have, you know, the control over what's being asked. I think that that is the biggest piece of how data triggers people and how people are turned off. For example, I went to the urgent care yesterday here, and my earring was stuck in my ear. And I was going to get my earring out of my ear, and they asked all about like transgender identities, and it seemed very inclusive, right, at first. So I was pretty forthcoming. I was like, you know what? Because most of the time I answer female. You know, I don't. If they ask, that's how I answer. But it seemed inclusive, so I continued to answer and continue to answer. And then like I got to a question that says birth sex. And then I immediately was turned off and I was wondering like, how does this connect, right? And so my point is what seems inclusive may not be. And what works for one person may not work. Well, we definitely know. One thing for a big group of people won't work. So I think that when you're creating your committee, you have to have diversity, and you have to have several identities at the table. Something else that always happens with people that do research, I know I got some researchers in here, I'm not one of y'all, I just participated. But what happens is they, in their mind, they have this number or this quota to fill, and like they fill their quota, and then they like try to pull all this information from this 2 or 3 people, right? So I think that building a process out with the committee, right? And then completely changing the committee of people that create the questions, right? Because what happens is bias still remains. So oftentimes we pick a group of people and we stick with this same group of people, and the project ends up being phenomenal. But at the end of it, because I've been there, you work really hard and you ask for feedback and you get all this feedback, and you kind of are like hurt because you're like, damn, I thought I did good. But actually, the feedback is really great. It's just that you didn't have enough people at the table initially to have those thoughts. So I think that building a committee of people and making sure that every step of the way you change those committees, right? And then come back to reflect among everybody, or even, dare I say, do an evaluation among those committees, right? To make sure that what you're asking or what you gathered was what they were trying to say. So I think that it's simple. Just include the community and amplify the voices and the needs that were, communicated in that initial assessment.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I'm piggybacking off of that, representation matters in the panels and in the different boards and the different things that are gathering this information. Like when we do our basic, right? Let's talk about it in terms of like registering or getting people to register to vote, right? You want to get them the information, so it's bare minimum information, right? It's like, oh, just your name, your address, or not even your address, but you need your zip code, your name, and your email address, right? So we can send you a reminder, and then we know what county, what city, what area you're in, and that's it, right? Basic information. And so we're like, okay, we can do that. Then you go to like urgent care, and they want to know, they need to know the last 10 years of your medical history. And it's a lot more personal, it's a lot more in depth. And then we talk about, applications for home or renters or things like that. And the information is the left side of it, right? It's all your addresses and all your phone numbers. Even doing your name change requires the past 10 years of your life. So when you talk about protecting that data, or you talk about introducing that data, it's about not only how it's collected, but how it's held, how it's saved, and then how it's distributed. Is it distributed internally? Is it something that's shared with other places and other things? Like I go to a doctor's office that shares my information with the pharmacy, that shares my information with my primary doctor, all these different things, right? So when we're talking about that process, I do agree that visibility matters, that representation matters, because there needs to be somebody that says, hey, listen, we can't say that. That's you have to be willing to speak up and be like, that's not gonna rock. Like, yes, it'll rock for half the room, but the other half of the room is gonna walk out. They're gonna be like, I'm not doing this. Because now I feel like if I answer these questions honestly, I'm gonna get treated differently. There's that point in time when we're given the information, we're like, somebody's gonna use this against me. I some people to this day that won't even give me any information when they register because they're like, no, because the government's gonna take it and use it. And I'm like, you have an iPhone? The government got you, sis. Like, let it go. Like, it's just people don't think like that, right? Even that, your phone, everything. People email. People don't change their password. They got the same password for 17 million things. They don't change nothing, not once. It's all the same. I've yelled at my mother so many times, being like, at least change one of the kids. Like, girl, you got like 5 kids and like 17 grandkids. Pick somebody else, please. Please and thank you. Write it down if you have to. It's okay, but like keep that, on the low. But people don't think like that. You think you're safe because you haven't been affected. But like most things in this world, it's not until it rocks your world that you realize how easy it was to get you.
I was gonna add in that relationships are so important and critical when building infrastructure for collecting data. And YouTube spoke really, really well to different practices around, when you're auditing, when you're creating. We have a sex education curriculum that we've had for 25 years in partnership with the Unitarian Universalist Church our whole lives. And it's really more than sex education. It's about the whole body. It's a holistic curriculum. This curriculum is a lot. It goes from kindergarten all the way up to senior age variation. And so we just did a massive audit and reevaluation and overhaul of images that we have in our K-10 through 12 range. And because we have queer folks like myself who have been exposed our whole lives, who have had their lives changed by being able to explore their bodies, know who they are, be told they're good, know what consent is, but they haven't seen themselves reflected in the images that are within the curriculum. It took us years. Sometimes data takes years because data is not just a number, data is a person. And I think sometimes even as researchers, we can forget that because of the urgency of the moment, right? But they're people. So we had an advisory council specifically created for those images, which took a long time to discern who would be their representation. And then we had people outside of that advisory council who would also audit and advise. And we are a small but mighty team, but this was a lot to do. And of course, we paid every single person who participated in that fairly and ethically. And we were looking for folks within the trans community who could speak to the different, expressions of yourself externally, internally, so that we were creating those images, hopefully in the most holistic and loving form, right? And we do that with all of our curriculum. I think that for us in data, we have a really, really robust data of our trainers who give the sex education curriculum our whole lives. And we go through that every 2 years to audit. We also have agreements about where the literature goes, where it doesn't go. And we're always like thinking about, even in this moment, we are having internal conversations about what do we need to do to be proactive about what's happening in order to keep those people safe who are doing bold work, sex education work. And again, another component of like church infrastructure is if the schools aren't going to give you holistic sex education, we will. And the other thing about data and resources and diversity is there are ways to partner with others in order to fund that data and have those fiscal sponsorships outside, right? Not being the main people who are playing in the research. I think that's really important as well. But relationships, always auditing, critiquing in a very queer way, queer and person, yeah.
Raquel, I have a question for you. This might be our last one.
I'm not a researcher.
It's okay. I don't know if we still want to do Q&A. Yeah, okay, I got you. Yeah, okay. But I want to ask one last question before we wrap it up for possible Q&A here. And it's regarding your article in your Time 100 Women of the Year. You had a quote that says, we want to be the glue between these different fights and get people talking about how restrictive ideas around gender impacts us all. And this really talks about your vision of unity, right, and intersectionality in the trans community. And it really suggests that gender-based restrictions and societal norms don't just affect trans people, but impacts everyone in different ways, right? So I want to ask a question for you about what does bodily autonomy look like in a digital age, especially in light of anti-trans tech surveillance?
Wow, big question. Well, I will say, I think the framework that we've been working with at Gender Liberation Movement is gender liberation. And so we've been really trying to expand this idea of trans visibility and re-articulate it in a way that people can understand how gender impacts their lives. And I think we've seen the shortcomings of just thinking trans people being visible is going to shift material conditions or get people to think differently. Like, we actually need cis people to understand that you're fucking gender non-conforming too. Like, you're actually not doing gender right either. So you kind of need to understand how these ideas impact your life too. And I think bodily autonomy is very key because, well, we all have bodies, but folks need to understand like the fight for abortion access is uniquely and intrinsically connected to this fight for gender affirming care. I mean, if you're someone who needs fertility treatment, right? Like, all of that really should be a part of our reproductive justice frame, but we often don't think about it like that. Or like, our movements have really been siloed for too long, and we have a unique opportunity understanding how fascism impacts all of our lives to start being the glue, right? Start getting those kind of connections happening for other folks. And I think, even broadening that, thinking about this big, beautiful bill that we heard, not gorgeous at all, but that we've heard about a lot in the news recently. That is a perfect example of how coming after gender affirming care is part and parcel with how they want to come after everybody's care. Because those cuts to Medicaid, those cuts to Medicare, that's how you get folks who maybe don't think about trans folks at all, or maybe have the most ignorant ideas about trans folks, to understand their plight in this fight for our bodily autonomy as well. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about that glue, and yeah, getting people to understand that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. I want everyone to give it up for our amazing women today. Thank you all very, very much for your time, the work that you do, and continue to to celebrate and do your best, like I said, to help each and every one of us in this room. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Is that Q&A?
Yeah, I'm about to say Q&A. Okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead. Please state your name, maybe pronouns if you want, in your question.
Hi, I'm Reverend Carmarian, She Series Pronouns. I want to shift just a little bit because when we talk about safety, I want to bring in, we've been hearing this throughout today, collaboration, relationship, safety, right? So let me give you a scenario so you can be able to respond. And it may be a trick question because we don't often think outside the box when it comes down to the circle accountability, right? So you on the panel are very diverse. You come from different walks of life, various stages, different regions, and so forth, which is remarkable. We need that. In the climate that we're living in, collaboration and relationships are important. But then those who you are supporting tells you that one of the collaborative organizations or groups that you're with have done harm to them. So that's safety issue, right? Has done harm with them. But how do you respond to the community but still be able to collaborate to keep your relationship because they haven't done harm to you, but because you know that the collaborative of the relationship has done harm to the community, what is our responsibility? Let me give a caveat is that however we've been doing prior to this administration is no longer going to work.
Okay.
We keep talking about unity. And the other piece is that all of us are victims now. I cannot cry that I'm a victim when I have privilege. None of us have privilege when Trump is in office, as someone that's trans-identified. So again, the question is collaboration, relationship, and safety. What is the circle accountability of response when someone says that harm has been done to them, but you collaborate and have a relationship with them? And at this state of age, we all need everybody still at the table.
I want to talk about that because we've actually so I'm the founder and executive director of We Care Tennessee in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm also one of the co-managing executive directors of Black and Pink in Omaha, Nebraska. And I've collaborated with organizations at both orgs with problematic organizations. What I will say is, for me, when my people are harmed on my watch, it's a no-go. We can no longer do the collaboration in the same way, okay? That does not mean that you cannot honor your end agreement, right? So we worked with someone who I told them that because of the response from the participants who they brought, that I would ask them not to be in the meetings anymore, right? But they could still pay the stipends to the participants and also sponsor their project. They later did not keep that end of the bargain, right? But we had to make up for those funds because I stood by that they didn't need to be there. Like, if you harming people, I don't care if you brought them here, they're no longer going to be harmed. So I uninvited them, right? But I did keep the relationship open to say, hey, we can partner maybe in the future, but we have to look at what it looks like. Now, I also have partnered, and these are trans-led organizations, which really makes it hard. Because I'm not talking about big white organizations with a whole bunch of money. I'm talking about other organizations that, for the sake of us in the movement, that I can't go public about. Because I don't believe in going out and tearing down an organization. If we had a problem, you know, we can handle that and hopefully it stays there. I think that it's really important that we understand that transphobia and homophobia and hate spewed against each other on social media only fuels our counterparts who do it as well, right? And it validates that what they do matters. Because for me, a lot of this shit that they do, it don't matter. I don't care. But if I see one of my sisters coming out, like it really matters to me.
Right.
But when it's organization against organization, I tend to bow out of giving my opinion because for me it's in poor taste or in bad taste. So I feel that you are working with an organization and they bring harm to your participants, that you should end the relationship for that particular project. Okay. I also would like to say that you have to have the awareness that you will have to pick up everything that they promised to do. But that's okay, because that's what we do in this work. I do think that under the current administration, it's important to keep relationships and lines of communication open, but it's not important to work with them again. I did say keep the communication open, but it's not important to work with them again because it is about safety. It is about safety. And if people are harmed once on my watch by an organization that said that they were here for that particular group of people, I am more inclined to believe you will do it again before I believe that, hey, let me forgive y'all and y'all won't do it. So what I'm saying is I'm gonna state what the issue is. I'm gonna end the relationship. I'm gonna keep the lines of communication open in case they want to throw some money my way. And then other than that, we're good. I'm not gonna come out against you because I'm not gonna work with you anymore. And I'm not gonna work with you anymore because I want to keep people safe. And I also need to be authentic in my leadership. Whoever we work with as organizations and as people, you have to be able to live with that and stand with it. We in a time where the money and all this shit is out the door. Can you sleep at night knowing that you're working with the people that you're working with? That's how I move and I operate. So I end the relationship.
I'm gonna say because of time, okay, oh yeah, I'm gonna say because of,
We'll take one more
wanna take one more? Okay, go ahead.
I'm so confused. No, I just want to add to that basically there's another line to that though. I in Florida, I have experienced many situations with somebody who stepped into someone else's shoes. And a lot to that, I didn't understand and know the relationships. So when people come to me and say that there's a problem, we have to have a real discussion. And we have to really address the issue because you can come to me and say, they hurt me, they did whatever, that organization is boo-boo the fool, don't do it. And I'm gonna say, okay, cool. But if I just believe you out the gate, off the jump, from an organizational standpoint, you might have had that happen and they have a new director, they've got a new team, they've got new staff. They're not the same people that they were when you were hurt. So we have to address the situation head on and we need to put those people in that place. And I need a full understanding. And I'm not the kind of girl that does the talk to you and talk to them. No, we're gonna sit in the room and I wanna hear you both talk it out and then we'll make a decision from there. And much to your point, I'm not gonna cut ties with you, but I am gonna make sure that I move differently. There's a thing that I learned, when people show you who they are, believe it. But also, just because you're no longer eating at my table doesn't mean I don't want to see you win.
Right.
So I will still send support and services, and I'll still use you as a reference. But I would definitely be mindful of that and make sure that I'm moving for the best interest of my community. Not the best interest of me, not the best interest of my organization, but the best interest of my community. It's different if we're talking about doctors touching their patients versus somebody who didn't invite you to the fundraiser because they don't like you. That's a difference, right? That's a personal problem y'all gotta figure out, not a problem for the community. Because at the end of the day, that fundraiser is raising money for the community. It's raising money for the movement. It's about something bigger than just myself or just you.
Personalities.
Yeah, so I would say keep that in mind when you're moving through when it comes to organizational. There's a lot of people who don't like how you move, so they're just gonna badmouth you and just say whatever. And if we believed everybody who said everything, girl, we would never move anywhere. So if we're looking to actually truly collaborate and we're actually looking to truly move as a unit and as a community, we have to actually do the hardest thing that is listen. Actually listen, not just hearing people. The difference between listening and hearing. You have to listen and really be willing to have those hard conversations and try to fix the problem before you just deem it irreversible or unmanageable. Because usually it's something that's surface level. It's not deep. But if it's deep, then yes, obviously I follow Ski.
All right, that's all the time that we have today. Again, one more time, clap it up for our amazing panelists. We thank you all for being here today, and we will see you at the next panel.
All right, we are getting ready for our next panel. In the meantime, we'll be putting up a QR code on the screen for a survey. We ask that you please do it. You can do it during the panel or in the break. But if you can scan the QR code, it really is helpful as they continue in future years and figure out if this is a good format, if there's adjustments or adaptations that they need to do. So please fill out the survey and scan the QR code. I don't see how it comes. Come on now. You know what? Let's get back to life, ladies.
Oh my God, yeah.
While people are doing that, I'm gonna ask Danielle to.
Yeah.
And
Could be a sub, it could be a sub.
bring for Trey and Josie. Josie's here yet?
Jay Austin. Jay Austin from, I think,
Thank you, thank you. Very excited to something like it's so fun.
over 90 days.
Yep. 90 days. Yep, exactly.
All right. I'll be asking for it. Soon.
Oh, that's
So that's, they're still involved.
Yep.
I'm smiling.
I'm a family for we're thinking about there. So
One more time, if you all wouldn't mind filling out the survey for the organizers, let them know how great a job they did, what else they need. And then we'll get ready for our next.
It's like literally.
it's like a walking place. I'll back up to.
Oh, okay.
I recognize their faces on the website, so.
I was just saying.
No, they have not.
Thanks.
Great job, sir. Nice to see you. Nice to see you as well. I saw you coming right there, bro.
I'm in the south. I think that's south.
It's nice.
Oh, oh. I was there. I was take it.
I guess literally, I work so close.
You did great. I mean, we did. We did. We kind of like documentary.
Yeah, but it's busy. It's
We're
your
gonna
day.
chance
It's your day. I'm always happy to. Thank you. I hope I can bring it tomorrow to you. Yes, yes.
So you want to
To be.
Yes,
I'm a reach out again just to make sure I got everything.
And if you need about any of the questions, you have my number?
No, no.
I'm at
Dr. Elijah.
Yes.
But can I introduce you just real quick?
Yes.
This is Rick Mike, he's the UCC policy director in community safety. Am I understood?
Yeah, whatever. What time y'all want me there? Because I don't think I've seen it. I know y'all be have
me, I'm here to
like I said. I take care of him. And he'll take care
I got him on the weekend.
He's the artist. So I'm crazy.
Bring him back. Come on, let's do this.
Thank you, guys. We'll get already.
Okay, thank you for waiting. We're ready.
Go tell you Josie is on there with
It's this last panel, it's the last one.
I don't know.
It's two more. No, this one and then another.
Yeah, we have. One.
Okay.
Another one. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, all right, everybody, this panel is called Access, Honor, and Longevity. This panel is really just
what it really takes for trans people to live long, supported lives. We'll be talking about dignity, aging, access, and how do we build a future where our people aren't just surviving, but they're thriving. So I guess we can go on and start with Jay, if you'd like to introduce yourself real quick.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Danielle, and thank you to everyone for organizing this, and I'm happy to be here finally. My name is Jay Austin. I live in South Jersey. I currently work for the Law School Admissions Council, and have been doing a whole lot of other things in between. Don't attack me perhaps, but I am the board chair for A4TE, had been the board chair for TILDEF as well, so I'm happy to talk to anyone about those organizations. I'll pass the mic.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows who I am. So, Marissa Miller, pronouncer she and they. In this capacity, the founder of the National Trans Visibility March, and I'm excited.
Well, all right. Well, hopefully we only have two people right now. We can get through a lot of these questions. So the first thing I want to start with is we throw around the word dignity a lot, right? But it's not always clear what that looks like in real life, especially when the people we're talking about are often people who have been pushed the furthest to the margins. So the first question is, when we talk about dignity, what does that really mean for trans elders, veterans, disabled folks, and our neurodivergent community members?
Well, I'm happy to start with that one. Someone told me that once you start retiring from jobs, you are more willing to talk about your age as opposed to hiding your age. So I'm proud that I will be 70 my next birthday. Yeah. So I am truly an elder in so many capacities and delighted to be here in that respect. So I may walk a little slow, got little things going on, but all in all, it's good. The question of dignity, I think I'll start there because that's a really good one. I think about my mother who passed away 3 years ago. She was 92. And one of the reasons that gave me the power, the strength, the narrative to kind of live my true self was her having dementia. And one of the things that she always used to say is, "Dear Lord, let my last years be my best." She didn't say much else, but she would repeat that. And I realized that she'd been repeating that really since her youth, 1940s, late 30s when she was born. And, it didn't really mean a lot to me, but now it does. And I think about dignity in the life that I want to live, and the life that I want others to enjoy too, for all of us, right? Particularly for our trans brothers and sisters, is your last years be their best. And however that shakes out, we need to make sure that that happens. So that's my thought about dignity.
And thank you for that. And you look amazing for 70. And I'm 55, 56 in February. I think for me, humanity is connected to dignity. And I thought I heard in the question, how do we not forget? And I think that is by acknowledgement, because I think often, even inside of our community, ambition can sometimes offer erasure. And that removes the dignity. I think for people that are elders that have built their whole lives doing the work, I think for me, that is the removal of dignity. So for me as an elder, what dignity looks like for me is respect, acknowledgement, and the lack of erasure. Because I think a lot of times when the baton is passed, we take the baton and we run. But I think often it's not an acknowledgement that we have the baton and where we got it from, but there is a respect that comes with that baton being passed. And so I think my dignity is connected to the lack of erasure. Because as I'm getting older, I'm worried. I spent my whole career in HIV. That's all I got. So what's next, for me? And so part of that dignity is the acknowledgement, letting my old ass still hold community, and tolerating sometimes is a portion for me.
Can I build on that on the baton particularly, because I feel that way especially now, right? As I'm looking at where I am in terms of passing the baton and the work that I've done for so long in so many different spaces. And I do worry about passing the baton and making sure that it's not dropped, the flame isn't dimmed as we pass it. And I'm not sure, I know in my own work, how do I ensure that that happens too. And part of that for me is trying to empower and strengthen, the next generations, right? And giving them some of the tools that have helped sustain me, particularly in hard times, right? So I think that word baton is a really good one because it's really true.
And really, just to follow up on that, like so much of the work that we do is about like, the survival in the now, right? But what about the long game? What are we doing, or what should we be doing to support the long-term needs of trans people, like housing, aging, and stable income?
I think, and thank you for the question. I think it's really important that in leadership is that not just that we pass the baton. I think there's a part of accountability when we pass it to ensure that they have tools to sustain. Leadership for me looks like getting out the way. And so in order to do that, I think there has to be people that are ready. And I think that leadership and ready is a huge difference. And I think that work is driven by more than passion. It's driven by ambition. And so we have to figure out, I think, in that particular thing, it's like, what is my end goal? Do I want to be famous? Do I want to change lives? And I think how we get there is where it's important that we follow suit. Because I think everybody has an end goal of where they want to go. And I don't think being famous is wrong. But I think, because I wanted to be famous. When I first got into work, I saw the Monica Roberts, and I saw those people, and everybody was talking, and they were doing blogs. And I wanted to be a girl that, because as a trans person, trying to find identity, you're often left alone. So when you find a tribe of people, then you really want to invest in that tribe. And that's what it is for me. I transitioned out of an organization I founded in Indiana, hired an executive director. I don't think she's in the room. And, whether people believe it or not, the National Trans Visibility March, I've had this is my 7th year. Will I continue with it? Yes. But in order for it to grow, I have to go. And see, I'm clear about that. I'm a tree. I don't have to worry about the leaves once they hit the ground. I don't have to worry about who's gonna water me. All I have to do is stand firm. And what falls off the tree, it doesn't belong to me anyway. It belongs to them. So that's my theory about it.
Yeah, I think for me too, even though I'm still very involved on a national level and a regional level, lots of organizations, I think I've really narrowed my scope. And it really dawned on me several years ago, because I said, I know very few Black trans men over the age of 65. And so as I began to kind of look across the country at the folks that I knew and said, who knew somebody else, I decided that that's the community I wanted to focus my time with now. Narrow the scope. How can I help impact people's lives? And, it's something as simple as, so we meet once a month virtually, from all over the country. There's a few of us, not many. And one of the things we started talking about was colonoscopies, right? Because there's things you need to do. We talked about how do you apply for Medicare, Medicaid, really trying, because I was amazed at how many folks, don't have anyone in their family to talk to. And yes, you can reach out to some of the organizations nationally to help you navigate some of that stuff. But sometimes you just want somebody who's been there and who's going through it with you too. And so I appreciate still being involved on a big scale. But at this point in my life, and whatever my last years are left, I'm going to try to be there for the trans brothers, particularly Black brothers who look like me and who are over the age of 65 or 70. Yeah.
Thank you. So one of the things is, about our community, and the mainstream and just like the climate that we're in, right? Like it seems like the world only really pays attention to us like during June, or like Trans Day of Visibility, or when something bad happens to one of us. How do you all think we build systems that value trans lives beyond just like visibility and those moments of crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to try to take that one start off. I think that's really interesting. I think again, kind of the generational place, and I don't want to just focus on being an elder, but that's where I'm at right now. And I'm really, several of us have talked about this, and we're struck by how many folks who have lived their whole lives and now want to remain invisible still, because that's how they've lived their lives. But understand the tensions in doing that, right? As you're aging, you may have to make life planning decisions. You may have adult children or relatives or have none. And so that that desire to frame the rest of your life in a way that's really powerful and meaningful for you, it really becomes more difficult on some level as you age in place. And so, the things that we can do to support each other, and again, whether it's the national organizations, regional organizations, or just building a community, I think those are critical because I've met, and I think the oldest guy that I've met is 82. Wow. And, he lives in a bright red state, knows no one. And so, his once a month meeting with us is the most important thing in his life right now. Wow. And if that means standing up for that, and even though, he's not out, he's never been out, has lived his whole life, he said his community would be shocked if they knew. But he's also worried, what if he passes out in the street, has to have some health care, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that really begins to settle into you at certain point as you age and as you live, and hopefully live healthy and safely.
No, you don't have anything. So moving on to the next question, and I love who's Jay and you are in here. So earlier Jay had mentioned like how much that being around trans elders fills their cup, right? But there's a lot of trans elders who have survived a lot, like decades of invisibility, and have made it through things that, many of us couldn't imagine. So the question is, what can we learn from older trans folks who have lived through invisibility and found ways to survive?
Thank you for the question. I don't think my survival was based upon my visibility. I think my survival was based upon my resilience. And so I'm probably one of the trans people might not understand this. I don't live in identity. I live outside of identity. I transitioned very late in my age. And I don't necessarily think that being out front or being seen is what created opportunity. I think what created opportunity was the tenacity and the resilience not to stop. Because I think when we were talking earlier about, there being only two genders. Well, when I started my work, trans people were not acknowledged on any state or federal forms. And so we were either checking other, or we were even in the health, whatever they do, the health record thing when they check. We were checking men who have sex with men. Mm-hmm. So we have always been in a category, and even when trans women and visibility began to happen, it was gay men who opened their doors first and allowed us to a table. And then cis women begin to share space. And so I often tell people, for me, what I think will continue to create visibility is by us and for us. I think that we have shared tables way too long. I think that there's a table for them, there's a table for them, and there's a table for us. Because I also think that we have very different experiences. And so I'm often silenced in rooms when I'm with cis women. I want to talk about the trade. I want to talk about experiences that are sometimes traumatic when we talk about them sleeping with the same men or some of those things. So I think creating systems that are for us and by us, I think those are the systems that work for us. They're not always sustainable because we have to do other things to make them sustainable. But I think systems that are created for us and by us will always give us the continuum that we need.
Nancy, would you like to touch on that?
Yes, and I apologize about my tardiness. And as I was getting situated, your direct question, if you don't mind.
Yes, the direct question was, what can we learn from older trans folks who have lived through invisibility and found ways to survive?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that when I take a look at where we are, I talk to a lot of younger folks, and there's a lot of panic and fear in a lot of the young folks. And when I look and I see our elders, they're the coolest cucumbers in the room. And it's because of the understanding of what resiliency is. And that resiliency is not something you can just get overnight. It takes time. It takes, unfortunately, punches. Because I always say, just because you're resilient doesn't mean that that punch doesn't hurt, right? It's about getting up and continuing to walk forward. And when I look to our elders, I see folks that have seen this before, that have under, and who understand where we were, and where we have come, and that we will continue to make it. Miss Major, I remember I shared this story where there was a young trans person, and very similar to a panel like this, young trans person pouring their heart and soul out, saying, "It's so hard. I don't want to be here. It's miserable." And she said two words, or she said a few words, "Honey, we're still fucking here." And to me, that right there is what resiliency looks like and what it looks like to demonstrate it. And that's what our elders do every day. And that's what's really important for me as I go through this and understand the data, understand the statistics. And I'm about to be 40 years old, and I'm considered an elder in a lot of spaces. You know, like as a Latina woman, like as a Latina trans woman, and I'm an elder for a lot of these folks. So I just try to hold that and move forward. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. The resiliency is a great question. I mean, I think the punches. Yes, I mean, I think about both my grandmothers on either side were domestics, and I tell folks all the time, it's like that's only two generations, and so things do happen. They may not happen on the time that you want. And I think that's the thing that I'm recognizing now, but they do happen. And so, particularly thinking about, younger folks that I talk to and trans folks, and, sometimes I'm kind of flippant initially and I say, I got shoes in my closet that are older than you, right? But at the same time, I understand where they're coming from, right? And so they looked just to say, wow, you're G-pop, right? I said, yeah, I am a grandfather. And you can call me G-pop because I hope that you get to live the life that I have lived. And you too can see yourself and see a future for yourself. And so, I try to show up in spaces to just be that representation so that, you can live and live and not just live well, but see yourself. Because so oftentimes, and I've met many young folks who are like in their 20s and 19 and 18, and they're just like, I don't know how I'm going to do it now in 2025. Really, can I survive this? And say, look, you can, but it's going to take a little work, and just pick yourself up and continue doing it because you matter, we matter, and that's the message that I want to give. I may not, and I've had to convince myself over this maybe these last few presidential terms, but particularly now since November, I may not see this swing back. And I had to get okay with that. It's really hard to say that, sometimes because you think you've led this fight, but I'm okay with not seeing the pendulum swing back. But I want to make sure it swings back for my grandkids, right? And so that's when I'm talking about the generational thing. It's really important to me. I'm passing that baton. I don't want my grandchild to recognize. I want my grandchildren to recognize that G-pop did all he could in 2025. So I can't be mad at him and think about, well, why aren't you out there in the street, G-pop? Weren't you doing this? How come you weren't doing this? G-pop was, and a whole generation of us, we were doing it too. And so that's the kind of just wrapping my brain around that. Sometimes for a while there, I was just crying every day. you know, back in November and January. And I was just like, I can't get through this. And my wife was like, you said, and we've been married 25 years too. That's another longevity that we have going on. Yeah, right? And so we both looked at each other and said, okay, we have to stop crying and be mad. We have to get out there and what can we do? And so that's really important to me. It's just kind of passing the baton, keeping that resilience and reminding folks, you know, you too will be an elder at some point.
You. And we've got one more before we open it up for Q&A. We've talked a lot about systems and different systems and systems that are built for us and systems that aren't, say. And we also know that fear shouldn't be the foundation for aging in our community either. Our community deserves peace and power. I think the question is, what do you think, what needs to exist or be built so that trans people can grow older in safety and power and peace instead of in fear?
I probably would say, and thank you for being a wonderful moderator today. There's an organization called SAGE that works with aging individuals, I think particularly aging individuals living with HIV. I believe creating, you know, there's a model. We often really want to, you know, always recreate when we can just, use the wheel. I think they say, why create it? Just use the wealth. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a template of what it could look like, and I think, you know, I've worked with SAGE maybe a number of years ago when I was at NMAC, and the services that they provide are essential to aging, you know, not just health, but also work. You know, when we age, especially people that retire, you know, my mom retired and she never wanted to work. We thought she was going to not to be at home and be okay. You know, we thought she was going to volunteer and she was going to be out. Once she retired, she was done. But systems that create opportunities for people that are not done. Because I think, you know, as we age, I know certainly being 55, like, sometimes I get depressed, you know, and I get lonely, you know, and some of those things. And I think having an organization that really looks at the needs of the people, because I think a lot of organizations are created just because we want to create an organization. It's nothing about what I need and any of those things. But I think really creating something like a SAGE for aging people so that, you know, we don't get lost in the shuffle. Because I remember even when the injectable, and I always talk about HIV, I had 25 years in public health. And so I remember when the injectable came out, you know, us longtime survivors, we was evil. So you want us to jump up and down, not because you got an injectable to prevent HIV when we didn't get that opportunity. So it has, I believe, creating systems that allow people's voices to be what guides the work that is done versus those systems. We keep talking about systems that don't work instead of continuously creating those systems that don't work.
Yeah, and absolutely, the systems, the organizations. I had the privilege of leading and running the U.S. Transgender Survey, where we surveyed 92,000 trans people across the entire country and the state of the territory. Thank you so much. And one of our prioritizations and populations was the older populations, because there isn't a lot of data that gives us the understanding of what our aging populations need in our communities. And one thing that we were able to understand is, and this is one of those hard realities, and I'm sure that we've probably discussed it or alluded to it already, is we have this a massive amount of young people who are trans, coming out, they're living their true selves, and it's because of the work of our elders that gave us the strength and courage to be able to do that. But we cannot ignore the fact that it took the bodies and blood of our elders to get to where we are, and we have a generational gap because we don't have a lot of we don't have enough elders to mentor all the young folks. And it is a tragedy to our community that we have lost a lot of that. And it made it difficult for us to be able to talk to each other because the generational divide is so huge for a lot of us. And so when we talk about organizational needs, we need to make sure that we are educating our youth to understand that, you know, we grew up in a different time, a different place. And you were talking about, you know, on forums, you have to say men sleeping with men, right? And just to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be able to receive the care, to be able to receive basic human dignity, we had to give ourselves less humanity just to do that. And so those stories need to be translated to our youth to understand where we come from. Where we are now today is because of the bodies of folks that put themselves on the line. And so if we want to be able to help create those systems, we need to have informed systems that are designed by us, created by us, that are informed by our elders. That has to be the core to how we're gonna move forward, so we don't have to live to the same atrocities that you had to go through and just putting out those forms. And so we need data, we need to collect stories, we need to share those stories, because that is how we're going to build that resiliency. Because if we don't have that demonstration, then we're just gonna repeat history. Yeah, so yeah.
Do you have anything?
Oh, yeah, I think, you know, to both what's been said up here is in terms of, you know, beyond the infrastructure, what else is needed? Part of that is just people who are willing to be connectors, right? I'm willing to be a connector, and I say that a connector meaning an elder generation, you know, folks who are over 65, folks who are 70, who are asking questions like, you know, my grandnephew is using Instagram. I don't know anything about that. Can you tell me what that is? And so I've gotten groups of 20-year-olds to kind of trans men to meet with elders and say, this is how you use an IG, right? This is what TikTok looks like, because, you know, just because we're older doesn't necessarily mean we don't want to be involved in the social media thing. And I realize that's a great way for the young people to be able to say they're assisting us, you know, in a certain way. So those kind of mentoring relationships is something that's really been important, and putting those together. There are a couple of organizations around the country that are doing work just for trans elders. There's a program out of the University of Virginia that I've been involved with that's trying to create a user-friendly website. That's also something that's just even, I talked to them about, I said, you need a larger font size, right? Because aging eyes act this way, you know? You don't need a lot of clicks to get the information. So talking about making things user-friendly for elders, that's part of that conversation too. So, you know, and when you are in these spaces, you know, do think about what it might mean for someone like myself or anyone else who's, you know, who's older, in terms of just navigating the spaces, right? And navigating, because, you know, listen, we do our Zoom monthly meetings. Some guys don't even know how to use Zoom. So we had these little instructions about what does it mean to be on Zoom? How do you turn on your mic? How do you turn on your camera? Right? I mean, just the things that, you know, folks who are younger might take for granted today. A lot of seniors don't have access to that, you know, and so they're just, don't overlook some of the things that seem, you know, mundane when you're going about your day-to-day work, being an activist and activism and things, because there's a group of folks who don't have access to that, and you have to help them and give them access.
Thank you. Well, we have a few minutes left. I want to go on and open it up for questions. If anybody has questions, Dr. Elijah.
I do have a. Thank you so much. I love this panel. First of all, let me just say this. I love this panel, and I have so many questions, but I'll try to narrow it down to like kind of two parts. One is about isolation, right? If when we think about everything that's happening now, and I think y'all touched on this a little bit, but when we think about aging and isolation, because kudos, I heard you say, I think, Jay, you're married 25 years, and that is a blessing. And so many of us either live single lives or live stealth or all the things, right? Dating is a whole nother conversation. So how do we make sure that our elders stay healthy, mentally and physically and involved? That's the one question. And then the second question I have is from a policy level. What can we do for our elders and those of us, all of us who are aging, when we live in this space of healthcare being taken away on so many levels? As a 55-year-old, for me to think about if I were 80 years old and I've been on testosterone for 30 years, and now I might go to the VA next week and I don't have that, how can we think about addressing those things? And even for our veterans, Jones, how can we think about addressing those things from a policy level so that as we continue these roundtable discussions, what should we be talking about in these rooms to make sure that our legislators are educated and they know how to make sure that we're included?
I'll answer the veteran portion, and then I'll touch on a solution. I'll let you go for there. One of the things that we've, as I am also the vice president of the Transgender American Veteran Association, we are dealing with the fact that people, regardless of age, and we know that veterans are more likely to be older to be receiving this health care because a lot of them go back to the VA to get their care. And on a policy level, and I think one of the explanations we need to say is, you think that you're just taking out like one little piece of somebody's health care and then they can get the rest of it. But when you lose trust in institutions and don't get complete health care, people will leave the system and not come back. And once a person leaves the system, the chances of that person coming back to that system go down dramatically. And so we have to focus on policy